Hello, students, and welcome back. Today's topic is cognitive development. Cognitive development. First, it's important to understand what maturation is. So maturation is basically the way development unfolds, and this varies from individual to individual. Roughly speaking, by about 6 months, a child should be able to sit up by itself. They should be crawling by about 9 months. They should be walking or engaging in pre-walking behaviors by about 12 months, and then walking independently at 15 months. I have a short video that you can watch. It's totally optional, but it shows all of the various different pre-crawling types of behaviors that babies will go through before they begin crawling. Now, it's important to note that not all babies go through these stages. Sometimes they just go straight from crawling to walking, but there are some pretty interesting ones there too. It's also important to understand what we're talking about when we talk about maturation. We're not just talking about fetal maturation, we're talking about maturation as a lifelong process. So we're going to watch a short video about that now. The other thing to keep in mind when we're talking about this is imprinting and critical periods. Now, you may remember critical periods from the unit over language, where we talked about if you miss a critical window for learning a language, you'll never fully be able to speak the language like fluently. But there are also critical periods for developing certain physical characteristics and traits as well, like walking. So if you're deprived of that ability when your body is most readily able to acquire it, then you won't be able to walk effortlessly. Imprinting is a really interesting concept, and it really applies more to animals, specifically birds, ducks, geese, that sort of thing. The idea is that when a baby, it will imprint on its mother. So basically, or not just on its mother, but anything it sees during a certain critical period, it will imprint on as its mother. So we're going to watch a short video by a guy named Konrad Lorenz right now, who experimented with geese. Now, that's an interesting video, right? But it's important to note that Konrad Lorenz was also a Nazi. So he wasn't like strongly anti-Semitic or anything like that. He was an academic who agreed to join the Nazi Party so he could continue to do his research. But it's just important to give you some historical context in that case. First, let's talk about schema theory. So schema theory is basically that we create folders for our information that we acquire about our world. So for infants and for young children, they may have some experience like this. They read about a cow, so they say, "Oh, it's a cow," and then they go to a petting zoo or just a zoo, and they see a moose. And so, what does it say? The child will say, "Cow." And so, what they're trying to do is they're trying to fit this new information into an existing schema. In this case, the schema of cow. And then hopefully, someone says, "No, no, 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 that's not a cow, that's a moose." And what happens then is the child accommodates, which means they create a brand new folder for moose. So Jean Piaget, he really is the first person to study basically the errors that children make when they're developing their thinking. And so assimilation and accommodation, this is just another example of this. The child, when it experiences a new animal, in this case a cat, they can refer to the cat as a dog, or they can accommodate the schema, meaning they can separate cat and even different types of dogs or different types of cats into separate schemas. So basically, the older you get, the more complex your schemas become. For example, we're going to do something called the refrigerator test. Okay, so just take a break, and I just want you to think the answers to the following questions. How do you put a giraffe in a refrigerator? How do you put an elephant in a refrigerator? The Lion King is hosting an animal conference, and all of the animals are in attendance except for one. Who is missing? And last, you come to a river that you must get across. However, it's inhabited by crocodiles. How do you manage to cross the river? Let me go ahead and give you the answers to the refrigerator test. Answer to question 1. You simply open the door, put in the giraffe, close the door. Question number 2, open the door of the refrigerator, take out the giraffe, put in the elephant, close the refrigerator. Question 3, who's not in attendance? The elephant, he's still in the refrigerator. And question number 4, you simply just cross the river because all of the crocodiles are at the animal conference. Now, if you didn't do so hot on this, that's fine. But what's interesting is that young children do really well on this test. That's because they have much more simplified schemas than you do. You know, for example, a giraffe is much too large to fit into a refrigerator, but a child does not know that. For a child, an elephant might as well fit into a refrigerator too, because to a child, elephant's big, refrigerator's big, so why not? So the reason why you did so poorly on this is because you have much more complex and many more schemas than children do. Jean Piaget. So Jean Piaget was a biologist who got into cognitive development by studying his own child, his daughter specifically. He basically starts with the premise that we don't start being able to think like adults. We develop this over time. So he was really interested in the errors that young children make when they're trying to understand the world and how that differs from adults. So one example is understanding size and scale. So the child on the left here is trying to slide on a miniature toy slide. The child on the right is trying to sit inside of a miniature car. So they don't understand yet. They haven't developed a schema for I am bigger than this object. Jean Piaget's stages of cognitive development. Basically, there are 4 stages. And the way that I remember this is with the acronym Stinking Pigs Can't Fly. This stands for sensory motor, preoperational, concrete operational, and formal operations. For each stage, there's an age window and developmental skills that happen in each of these as well. So for the first stage, the sensory motor stage, we're looking at the first 2 years of life. For the preoperational stage, we're looking for from about age 2 to age 7. For the concrete operations, age 7 to 11, and then formal operations is from age 12 onward. So some of the different interesting ideas here. In the first stage, the sensory motor stage, children experience, they develop object permanence, which can lead to stranger anxiety, which basically means when a stranger is introduced, the child feels anxious or nervous. They miss their parents when their parents leave. In the second stage, the preoperational stage, pretend play begins to take shape. Egocentrism also happens. We'll talk more about that in a moment. In age 7, the concrete operational stage, children develop the ability of conservation and basically, which is like mathematical transformations. And in the last one, children are developing formal logic, abstract reasoning, moral reasoning, and so on and so forth. Object permanence is that children, their whole reality exists in the present. They can't remember the past. They can't remember the future. So when an object disappears, what this means is that when you play peekaboo with a child, you are blinking in and out of existence for them. So like you have always existed, and then poof, you don't exist anymore, which is really interesting. Let's watch a short video about this now. And then you may notice that babies stare longer and with surprise when numbers don't make sense. Piaget thought that this was evidence that they are doing math. Like, for example, they would stare longer. So this is kids in the sensory motor stage doing math, basically. That's what we're talking about with strange numbers. What about the preoperational stage? So in this stage, kids start representing their schemas with feelings, words, images. They use visual models to represent places and perform pretend play, so playing doctor or school or something like that. They can start to picture the viewpoints of other people, replacing egocentrism with a theory of mind. And basically, egocentrism is believing that their experience is the only experience. Theory of mind is understanding that other minds exist other than their own, which is a difficult thing. Egocentrism, what is it? So here we go. So you ask a child in this stage who's egocentric, do you have a brother? And they might say, yes, Jim. Then you say, does Jim have a brother? No. How does this relate to our definition of egocentrism? Let's watch a short video about egocentrism now. It's because it's not just mentally, it's also physically not understanding another person's perspective. And then maturing beyond egocentrism, developing what's called a theory of mind. So a theory of mind is our ability to understand that others have thoughts of their own and which are different than ours. So here we have one of the tests. So this is Sally, this is Anne. Sally puts her ball in the red cupboard. Sally goes away and moves the ball to the blue cupboard. Where will Sally look for her ball? So with a theory of mind, you can picture that Sally will have the wrong idea about where the ball is. Let's watch a short video about theory of mind right now. Conservation is knowing that when equal quantities appear to change, they remain the same. Let's watch a video about this now. The concrete operational stage. This is from ages, it starts at about age 6, it ends at about age 11, again, varies from person to person. Children can now grasp conservation and other concrete transformations. They can understand simple mathematical transformations and reversibility of operations, which is, 3 plus 7 is 10. They can also figure out that 10 minus 7 is 3. The formal operation stage. So starting at about age 11 onward through the rest of your life. Formal operations includes allegorical thinking, such as people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Understanding that this is a comment on hypocrisy, not about actual glass houses. That's allegorical thinking or abstract thinking, or more algebraic if you want to think of it like that. An example of abstract thought would be the answer to this question. If you could have an eye anywhere else on your body, where would you want it to be? Where would you want yours to be? Now, what's interesting about this question is it's about abstract thought. For a child, if you ask them this question, they will say, I want the eyeball to be here. They want it to be here because they can't conceptualize, they can't think abstractly enough of having an eyeball anywhere other than where their eyes are normally located. But maybe you said on the back of your head so you could see in all around you, or maybe on your hand so you could see around a corner. I once asked a child this question and they said, right above, quote, the hole, so that I can watch a log come out. So children have some pretty bizarre ideas about that too. Okay. An alternative to Jean Piaget is Lev Vygotsky. And Vygotsky was a Russian psychologist, and he thought that development happened in terms of social communication, or in the context of social communication, and that children are learning inner speech. So he saw development as building on a scaffold. So basically, there are things the children can do independently, and there are things the children can't do. The zone of proximal development is you helping the child get from what they can't do to what they can do to what they couldn't do before. So a really good example of this, and a contrast between Vygotsky and Piaget, is that if you're teaching a kid to ride a bike, you kind of like scaffold, meaning you kind of hold them up and help them with balance, and then eventually you can remove the scaffold and they can do it independently. Piaget would say that a child should basically just do this independently until they figure it out on their own. Now, it's also important to note that with Vygotsky and Piaget, that Piaget is his model is what's called a discontinuous model, or discontinuity. And what that means is development is in stages, like stairs. It's like stair steps. So there's this stage from this age, and then you go up to the next, and so on and so forth. Whereas Vygotsky was a continuous theorist, or his model was one of continuity, meaning that development isn't so much in stages, it's just a lifelong gradual process with no sort of developmental milestones or markers. Which theory, just generally speaking, do you agree with more? Do you tend to agree more with the discontinuity model or the continuity model? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have for you today. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a fantastic day.